Did you know that although Peter is considered the first pope in the Catholic Church, he was not the first apostle? Christianity remains the most popular religion today, so it may seem difficult to believe it started with Jesus and only a few disciples. A disciple is anyone who believes in Jesus. During Jesus' travels, some of his disciples even followed him on his travels. Jesus picked 12 apostles out of those disciples as listed in the biblical books Matthew, Mark, and Luke. The information we know about each of these 12 men varies vastly. Some of them were so well known they even wrote books in the New Testament. Others don't have much more than their name mentioned in passing. Despite this disparity and confusion, the 12 apostles are vital to Christianity. By looking at each of them, we can learn more about how they shaped this world religion and continue to influence us today. Number 1. Peter. Peter is one of the most famous apostles and was, according to some denominations, the first pope. Experts are unsure when he was born, but they believe his birth name was Simon. He first appears in the Bible near the Sea of Galilee, around the lake of Gennesaret, when Jesus calls him and Andrew to become disciples. Some scholars believe Peter and Andrew may not have been doing the fishing themselves. Instead, they may have managed a small business and used hired workers. Although the Bible does not disclose many details about his personal life, Peter does appear repeatedly, often as the spokesperson for the apostles. This does not always portray him positively, and he is most remembered for denying Jesus 3 times on the night of Jesus' arrest, even though the text also showed Jesus accepting him. Peter was active in the early church after Jesus ascended to heaven, allegedly writing the 1st and 2nd Peter and several apocryphal books. Christian tradition states Peter died in Rome around 64 CE. He was crucified upside down because he didn't feel worthy enough to die in the same manner as Jesus. Since his death, Peter continues to impact Christianity. He is often depicted holding the keys to heaven, based on one of Jesus' statements about him. Whether or not Jesus intended to give him literal keys, Peter was one of the apostolic leaders, asking questions and leading the way for the new religion. Number 2. Andrew. Andrew was Peter's brother, but although Peter became the apostles' leader, Andrew is traditionally the first called apostle, earning him the nickname Protoclete. In the Gospel of John, Andrew was originally one of John the Baptist's disciples. When he heard about Jesus, he left John the Baptist and began following Jesus. Then he convinced his brother to meet Jesus, who came and eventually began following Jesus himself. However, besides this story, we don't have much information on Andrew in the biblical texts. He is mentioned several times as part of the group and helps with the miracle of feeding a large group of people. However, Andrew is more prominent in apocryphal works and Christian tradition. Some stories are fantastical, but most of his more probable tales center around Andrew's travels. He reportedly traveled to modern-day Poland, Iran, Scotland, Russia, and Turkey. Tradition states Andrew was also crucified, but he requested an X-shaped cross, which eventually became known as St. Andrew's Cross. It is often depicted with him in artwork. Number 3. James the Greater. There are several men named James in the New Testament, but James the Greater is almost always noted as the son of Zebedee. James was also the brother of John, and together they were nicknamed the Sons of Thunder. Although James is mentioned quite a bit in the Gospels, he does not say much. Some scholars believe he was part of Jesus' inner circle, which consisted of Peter, James, and John. These men saw the Transfiguration and were with Jesus in the Garden of Gethsemane before he was arrested. James is mentioned after Jesus ascended in the book of Acts. This biblical text discusses what the apostles and disciples did to start Christianity. In chapter 12, King Herod Agrippa orders James's beheading with a sword. This places his death in the early 40s CE, making James one of the first apostles to be martyred. However, some Christian traditions state James traveled to Spain to preach the gospel. While this does not coincide with historical or biblical evidence, James still left a lasting impact on Spain, even if he never actually visited. Number 4. John. John was the other son of Zebedee. While his brother was one of the first Christian martyrs, John wrote 2 of the most famous books in the Bible, the Gospel of John and the Revelation of John. Experts also believe he wrote the 3 letters of John, but those books are not as well known today. The Gospel of John differs from the other 3 Gospels, and some historians think it was written later in his life. John's Gospel is more thematic than the others, reading more like a story than a preaching aid. He also includes more historical details to help people better understand the places and circumstances of each moment. The Revelation of John discusses the apocalypse with symbolism and allegory, which is one reason it remains popular today. While it is the only apocalyptic book in the New Testament, it wasn't alone. Several other contemporary works were attributed to John, although they did not join the biblical canon. We don't know much more about John. Some historians believe he died of old age on the island of Patmos, where the book of Revelation was found and added to the Bible. Number 5. James the Lesser. Also known as James, son of Alphaeus, this second James was another apostle of Jesus. There is little definitively known about James. Experts believe he came from Nazareth, like Jesus, and also had a mother named Mary. Although some scholars believe James and Jesus were brothers, little evidence supports the idea. James, son of Alphaeus, is traditionally the author of the Book of James, a letter in the New Testament discussing Christian faith and wisdom. However, connecting this biblical text to James the Lesser is difficult because the letter does not specify which James wrote it. Several people named James participated in the early church. Traditionally, James, son of Alphaeus, was stoned to death around 62 CE as a martyr, leaving behind a letter and a collection of apocryphal works. Number 6. Philip. Philip was also one of the more prominent apostles, and the Bible contains more information about him than later apostles. He hailed from Bethsaida and appeared to have been a blue-collar common man, but he was also one of the apostles who worked with the Greek people. The Jewish and Greek people had different backgrounds and did not usually work together well. Philip appears to have served as a bridge between the two groups. He appears in the book of Acts, traveling to places like Samaria and Gaza. He is most famous for baptizing the Ethiopian eunuch. This eunuch was possibly the first non-Semitic person to receive the gospel, but it is the last mention of Philip in the Bible. Tradition states he wound up in Hierapolis, where he was martyred. Number 7. Bartholomew. Unlike previous apostles, there is almost no mention of Bartholomew in the New Testament. He appears on the lists of the disciples, but his actions are not recorded beyond that. Most historians think Bartholomew was Nathanael, who Philip brought to Jesus early on, but experts are still unsure. Whatever Bartholomew's real name was, he plays a role in the apocryphal writings, although many of his stories were fantastical, including secret knowledge about the destruction of the world and talking animals. Church tradition says Bartholomew was martyred by the Armenians around 68 CE, which involved being flayed alive. To this day, Bartholomew is remembered as the most tortured apostle. Number 8. Matthew. Matthew is famous for writing the Gospel of Matthew for Jewish believers. Some historians think he first wrote in Hebrew and Aramaic before translating to Greek. In his Gospel, Matthew notes he was a tax collector. People hated tax collectors because they usually took more than legally required and pocketed the profit. The Jewish people especially hated tax collectors because they worked for the Roman government, essentially turning their back on their Jewish faith. Despite his profession, Jesus invited him to become an apostle anyway. Sadly, no one knows what happened to Matthew after he wrote his gospel. He may have faded into history, but his legacy lives on. Although we only have one written work from Matthew, he dramatically impacted Christianity. He directly tied Jesus to the law of Moses, arguing that Jesus fulfilled the Jewish law and opened the way for all to embrace this new religion. Number 9. Thomas. Most famous as Doubting Thomas, Thomas is a crucial member of Jesus' apostles, even if most of his stories come from tradition or apocryphal stories. His most famous biblical moment comes after Jesus' crucifixion, when he heard Jesus had been resurrected. Thomas wanted to see Jesus physically before believing it. The idea of someone coming back from the dead was difficult to believe. Once Thomas saw Jesus' body, he believed and went on to help the other apostles spread the ideas of Christianity. There are two notable apocryphal books by Thomas called the Gospel of Thomas and the Acts of Thomas. Neither made it into the biblical canon. Tradition states Thomas went east to India, where he set up churches. He died of old age, although experts are divided on his final resting place. Number 10. Jude. Jude is one of the more obscure apostles, and historians even debate if Jude was his proper name. It is possible that Jude and Thaddeus are the same person. This person went on to write the book of Jude in the Bible. Sadly, this is all the information the Bible has on this apostle. Even his letter gives little information, not even providing a specific audience. Christian tradition offers a little more information. It states Jude was a Christian teacher working in places like Judea, Samaria, and Libya. He often traveled with Simon the Zealot, another apostle, and was eventually martyred around 65 CE. He was beaten to death in what is now Iran, allowing Jude to pass out of history as a traditional apostle. Number 11. Simon the Zealot. When Simon is mentioned, he is usually with Jude, so he suffers from many of the same problems. Historians also disagree on his name, although he is best known as Simon the Zealot. The Zealots were a branch of Judaism more focused on fundamentalism. While it is unlikely Simon turned away from following Jesus to become a zealot, this may be a reference to his enthusiasm for Christianity. Christian tradition says little about Simon, and even disagrees about how he died. Some say he died with Jude in Iran by being sawn in half, while others say he was tortured and crucified in Judea late in life, around 100 CE. This would have made Simon about 120 years old, so it's understandable why some question this story. Although Simon the Zealot may be relatively unknown, he is known as an enthusiastic apostle who traveled widely in his Christian evangelism. Number 12. Judas Iscariot. Although Judas Iscariot is one of the most famous apostles, his name is associated with evil. From the beginning of the Gospels, the writers note Judas was the one who betrayed Jesus, and there are no stories of Judas acting in a positive light. The Gospels were all written after the events, so the writers were set against him. Of course, for Christians, betraying Jesus earned Judas only shame and dishonor, and he has been a source of theological speculation for centuries. Judas Iscariot betrayed Jesus to the Jewish religious leaders for 30 pieces of silver, agreeing to work with them before the fateful night. However, Judas immediately felt guilty once he did and tried to give the money back. According to the Gospel of Matthew, when the religious leaders refused to take the money, Judas threw it at them and hanged himself in the field of blood. After this, Judas is not mentioned again in the Bible, even though his actions continue to influence Christian thought today. These 12 apostles were Jesus' inner circle, helping spread Christianity. 2 other apostles joined them after Jesus' ascension, Matthias and Paul. While we are still piecing together the stories of their lives, these apostles were essential to the start of Christianity, and their work continues to impact the world today. How would you like to get a deeper understanding of history, impress your friends, and predict the future more accurately based on past events? If this sounds like something you might be into, then check out the brand new Captivating History Book Club by clicking the first link in the description. To learn more about the 12 apostles, check out our book, The Apostles, a captivating guide to the 12 disciples in Christianity, the Apostolic Age, and the role of the Gospel of Jesus Christ in Christian history. It's available as an ebook, paperback, and audiobook. If you enjoyed the video, please hit the like button and subscribe for more videos like this.